When Nurse Patricia Wilson pushed open the girls' restroom door at 11:12 a.m., she expected to find another student skipping class or crying over boy drama. Instead, she discovered 3 of Riverside High's most powerful students unconscious on the bathroom floor, while 17-year-old Scarlett Thompson calmly washed blood from her knuckles at the sink. The scissors they'd planned to use on her hair lay scattered across the white tiles, like evidence of a war that lasted exactly 93 seconds. What Nurse Wilson didn't know was that she'd just walked into the beginning of the biggest scandal in Cedar Falls history, one that would expose decades of corruption and prove that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Before we dive deeper into how everything unfolded, I want you to think about your own school experience. Did you ever witness something like this? Maybe you were the one being targeted, or perhaps you stayed silent when you should have spoken up. Drop a comment below and share your story. Because what happened to Scarlett that Tuesday morning in October isn't just her story. It's a story that plays out in schools across America every single day. And it's time we talked about it. Riverside High School in Cedar Falls, Iowa, looked like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting from the outside. Red brick facade, white columns, perfectly manicured lawns that the groundskeeping staff maintained with military precision. Inside, however, the halls buzzed with the same toxic energy that infected every high school where money talked louder than morals and family names carried more weight than character. Scarlett Thompson had arrived at Riverside exactly 3 weeks earlier, her entire life packed into 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box that held her father's Purple Heart. Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson was currently serving his 3rd deployment in Afghanistan, and his daughter's academic excellence had earned her a full scholarship to one of Iowa's most prestigious private schools. Her mother, Rebecca, worked double shifts at the Veterans Hospital 2 hours away, which meant Scarlett lived in the tiny studio apartment above Murphy's hardware store, funded by a military family assistance program that most of Riverside's students had never heard of. At 5'4" with striking green eyes and hair, the color of autumn leaves, Scarlett possessed a quiet intensity that made teachers take notice and classmates feel unsettled. She spoke only when necessary, carried herself with military bearing inherited from her father, and consistently scored at the top of every class, despite having none of the advantages her peers took for granted. No private tutors, no test prep courses, no family connections to smooth her path, just raw intelligence and a work ethic forged by necessity. The morning of October 15th started like any other. Scarlett arrived at school at 7:15 a.m., 90 minutes before first period, to use the library's computers for her homework, since her apartment only had an ancient laptop that took 20 minutes to boot up. She moved through the empty hallways with purpose, her second-hand backpack slung over one shoulder, completely unaware that she was being watched. Kyle Brennan had been tracking her routine for weeks. The 18-year-old senior was everything Riverside High valued: star quarterback, student body president, and son of Superintendent William Brennan. At 6'2" with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of smile that had been winning him whatever he wanted since kindergarten, Kyle commanded respect through a combination of charisma, athletic ability, and fear. His inner circle consisted of Marcus Webb, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in Cedar Falls, and Tyler Mitchell, heir to a construction empire that had built most of the new developments spreading across Iowa's farmland. Kyle's problem with Scarlett wasn't personal, it was practical. Her academic performance was making his carefully maintained 3.8 GPA look mediocre by comparison. Worse, she'd had the audacity to raise her hand in AP government class and politely correct their teacher, Mrs. Patterson, about the specific language in the War Powers Act. Kyle had been planning to use that same topic for his senior thesis, counting on Mrs. Patterson's known inaccuracy to help him coast through with minimal effort. Scarlett's intervention had forced him to actually research his subject. But the real issue ran deeper than grades. Scarlett represented something that threatened the carefully constructed hierarchy at Riverside High. She was living proof that merit could triumph over money, that intelligence could outweigh influence, that a scholarship kid from a military family could outshine the sons and daughters of Cedar Falls' elite. Her very existence challenged the narrative that these privileged students told themselves about why they deserved their advantages. The plan had been forming in Kyle's mind for days, refined through group chats and whispered conversations in the locker room. Nothing too serious, just enough to put her in her place. To remind her that knowing her place was more important than knowing calculus or constitutional law. The bathroom incident was supposed to be a warning, a message delivered with just enough cruelty to ensure compliance. As Scarlett made her way to third period chemistry at 10:45 a.m., she noticed the unusual quiet in the normally bustling hallway. Students who typically crowded around their lockers had mysteriously disappeared, and even the ever-present custodial staff seemed to have vanished. Her military training, lessons her father had drilled into her about situational awareness, kicked in immediately. Something felt wrong. The girls' restroom near the science wing was her destination. A necessary stop before spending 90 minutes mixing chemicals in Dr. Harrison's notoriously strict classroom. As she pushed open the heavy wooden door, Scarlett's reflection caught in the large mirror mounted above the row of white porcelain sinks. For just a moment, she saw her father's eyes staring back at her. Alert, calculating, ready. That's when Kyle stepped out from behind the last stall, followed by Marcus and Tyler. The door swung shut behind her with a soft thud that sounded unusually final in the sudden silence. Tyler moved to block the exit while Marcus positioned himself near the window, ensuring no one could see in from the courtyard below. Well, Kyle said, his voice carrying that particular blend of arrogance and amusement that Scarlett had learned to recognize in the wealthy students at Riverside. If it isn't our little scholarship star, we've been looking forward to having a chat with you. Scarlett's hand instinctively moved toward her backpack's front pocket, where she kept the small recording device her father had given her before his deployment. Always document everything, sweetheart, he'd told her. Truth is your best weapon, but only if you can prove it. I don't think we have anything to discuss, she replied, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. And I need to get to class. Marcus laughed, a sound that echoed harshly off the tile walls. Oh, you're not going anywhere for a while. See, we've got a little problem with your attitude lately, acting like you belong here, showing off in class, making the rest of us look bad. Making you look bad? Scarlett's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm sorry, but I wasn't aware that academic performance was a competition with other students. I thought we were all here to learn. Kyle's smile grew wider, but his eyes remained cold. That's exactly the attitude we're talking about. You think you're better than us because you memorize textbooks and kiss up to teachers, but you're forgetting something important. This isn't your world. You're here on charity, and charity cases don't get to act superior. Tyler produced a pair of scissors from his jacket pocket, the metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. We thought maybe a little makeover might help adjust your perspective. Something to remind you that you're not as special as you think you are. Scarlett's father had taught her many things during their weekend training sessions in the woods behind their old house. How to read terrain, how to assess threats, how to remain calm under pressure. But most importantly, he'd taught her that sometimes the best defense was allowing your opponents to underestimate you completely. Please, she said, taking a small step backward and allowing her voice to shake slightly. You don't have to do this. I haven't done anything to hurt any of you. Kyle moved closer, interpreting her apparent fear as surrender. Oh, but you have. Every time you raise your hand in class, every time you score higher on a test, every time you act like you deserve to be here, you're hurting us. You're making us look ordinary, and we can't have that. What none of them noticed was the way Scarlett's right foot had shifted into a different position, or how her weight had imperceptibly moved to the balls of her feet. They were too focused on their predetermined roles in this little drama, Kyle as the commanding leader, Marcus and Tyler as the enforcers, Scarlett as the helpless victim. Hold her arms, Kyle instructed, reaching for the scissors. And make sure someone's recording this. I want her to remember this moment every time she looks in a mirror. That's when everything changed. As Marcus reached for her left arm, and Tyler grabbed for her right, Scarlett's training kicked in with devastating efficiency. Her father had been a hand-to-hand combat instructor before his deployment, and he'd spent countless hours teaching his daughter techniques that most 17-year-old girls would never need to know. Today, she needed every single one of them. Her left elbow drove backward into Marcus's solar plexus with surgical precision, causing him to double over and gasp for air. Simultaneously, her right hand grabbed Tyler's wrist and twisted it using a joint lock her father had shown her. Applying just enough pressure to force him to drop his grip without breaking anything, the movements were so fast and fluid that Kyle barely had time to register what was happening before Scarlett had created enough space to properly defend herself. "What the hell?" Kyle started. But Scarlett was already moving. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "If someone comes at you with a weapon, you don't run unless you can't avoid it. You disable the threat, secure the weapon, and maintain control until help arrives." The scissors in Kyle's hand qualified as a weapon, especially given his obvious intent to use them to assault her. Scarlett's right hand shot out in a perfect palm strike, connecting with Kyle's wrist just below where he gripped the scissors. The combination of surprise, precise targeting, and the natural weakness of the human wrist joint caused his fingers to open involuntarily. The scissors clattered to the floor, spinning across the white tiles until they came to rest near the drain in the center of the room. But Kyle wasn't finished. His athletic training and natural aggression kicked in as he lunged forward, trying to use his size advantage to pin her against the sinks. This was exactly the kind of scenario her father had prepared her for, a larger, stronger opponent attempting to use brute force to overcome technique and preparation. Scarlett sidestepped Kyle's charge with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years learning to read and redirect aggressive energy. As he stumbled past her, off balance from his missed tackle, she used his own momentum against him. Her right foot swept behind his leading leg, while her hands guided his upper body downward, sending him face first into the metal partition between two bathroom stalls. The impact wasn't severe enough to cause serious injury, but it was certainly enough to ring his bell and leave him dazed on the cold bathroom floor. Tyler, still clutching his twisted wrist, took one look at his unconscious leader and decided that discretion was the better part of valor. He turned toward the door, clearly intending to flee and probably summon reinforcements. Scarlett couldn't allow that to happen. If Tyler escaped, the narrative would be written by the three boys and their families' influence long before anyone bothered to ask for her side of the story. She needed all three of them contained until authority figures could arrive and document exactly what had occurred. "Tyler," she said quietly, her voice carrying a new authority that made him freeze with his hand on the door handle. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." He turned slowly, his face pale with shock and fear. Marcus was still on his knees, struggling to breathe normally after the elbow strike to his diaphragm. Kyle lay motionless next to the bathroom stalls, a small trickle of blood running from his nose where it had connected with the metal partition. "You're crazy," Tyler whispered. "You just assaulted the superintendent's son. You'll be expelled, arrested, destroyed. My father will make sure you never get into another school anywhere in this state." Scarlett reached into her backpack and pulled out the small recording device her father had given her. The red light indicated it had been running since the moment she'd entered the bathroom. Every word, every threat, every detail of their planned assault had been captured in crystal-clear digital audio. "Actually," she said, her voice calm and controlled, "I think you'll find that I was defending myself against a premeditated assault. Conspiracy to commit assault. Actually, since all three of you planned this in advance, the recording I just made will be very interesting to both the police and the school board." Tyler's face went from pale to green as the implications sank in. "You can't. That's not legal. You can't record people without their permission. Iowa is a one-party consent state for audio recordings." Scarlett replied, "Since I'm a party to this conversation, I don't need anyone else's permission. My father made sure I understood the legal requirements before he deployed. He wanted to make sure I could protect myself in situations exactly like this one." Marcus had finally caught his breath enough to speak. "Nobody's going to believe you over us. You're what?" Scarlett interrupted. "More important? More valuable? More deserving of protection because your parents have money?" Her voice hardened. "That might have been true before today, but it's not true anymore, because now I have evidence, and evidence doesn't care about your last name or your father's bank account." She moved to the bathroom door and turned the lock, ensuring that no one could enter or leave until she was ready. Then she pulled out her cell phone and dialed 3 numbers that would change everything. 911. Cedar Falls Emergency Services. came the crisp, professional voice on the other end. "This is Scarlett Thompson at Riverside High School. I'm calling to report an attempted assault with a weapon in the girls' restroom near the science wing. I have 3 students contained here who attempted to attack me with scissors. I defended myself, and they're currently incapacitated. I have audio evidence of their premeditation, and I need police and emergency medical services immediately." The dispatcher's training kicked in immediately. "Are you injured? Miss? Do you require medical attention?" "No. I'm uninjured, but one of the attackers may have a concussion and another is having difficulty breathing. They'll need to be checked by medical personnel. Police and EMTs are en route. Stay on the line with me until they arrive." "You said you have the attackers contained?" "Yes." "Ma'am, the bathroom door is locked and I'm the only one with the ability to unlock it. They're not going anywhere." Kyle began to stir on the floor, groaning softly as consciousness slowly returned. When his eyes focused enough to see Scarlett standing calmly by the door with her phone pressed to her ear, the reality of his situation began to dawn on him. "You don't understand what you've done?" he said. His voice slurred slightly from the impact. "My father runs this school district. Your scholarship. Your future. Everything you think you've earned, it can all disappear with one phone call." Scarlett looked down at him with something that might have been pity. "Kyle, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Your father doesn't run anything anymore. Not after today. Because in about 5 minutes, this bathroom is going to be full of police officers, EMTs, and probably a few administrators who are going to have to explain to the media why the superintendent's son and his friends thought they could assault a scholarship student without consequences." The sound of sirens was beginning to filter through the bathroom window, growing louder by the second. Tyler had slumped against the wall, the full weight of their situation finally hitting him. Marcus sat on the floor, his arms wrapped around his still-aching midsection, staring at Scarlett with a mixture of fear and something that might have been respect. "You see," Scarlett continued, her voice taking on the teaching tone she'd inherited from her father's military briefings. "You made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed that because I was poor, because I was new, because I was alone, that made me weak. But you forgot something important. I'm not just a scholarship student. I'm the daughter of a combat veteran who made sure I could handle myself in situations exactly like this one." Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Accompanied by the static crackle of police radios, Scarlett moved to the door and called out, "Officers, this is Scarlett Thompson. I'm the one who called. I'm going to unlock the door now." As the lock clicked open and the door swung wide to reveal 2 Cedar Falls police officers, EMT personnel, and Assistant Principal Mrs. Henderson, Scarlett felt a moment of profound satisfaction, not because she'd hurt anyone, that had been necessary self-defense, nothing more, but because she'd proven something important, not just to Kyle and his friends, but to herself. She was exactly where she belonged. The next hour passed in a blur of official procedures, witness statements, and medical evaluations. The EMTs determined that Kyle had a mild concussion but no serious injuries. Marcus had some bruising to his ribs, but no internal damage. And Tyler's wrist was sprained, but not broken. All 3 were transported to Cedar Falls General Hospital for more thorough evaluation, accompanied by police officers who would be taking detailed statements about their attempted assault. Scarlett's recording device proved to be a goldmine of evidence. Not only did it capture the entire bathroom incident, but it also contained clear audio of the boys' premeditation, their intent to humiliate her, and their explicit statements about using their family's influence to avoid consequences. The Iowa State Police Digital Forensics Unit would later confirm that the recording was authentic and unedited. By noon, news of the incident had spread throughout Riverside High like wildfire. Students whispered in hallways, teachers gathered in small groups during their lunch breaks, and parents began calling the school administration demanding answers. The local Cedar Falls Gazette received an anonymous tip about the incident and sent a reporter to the school, who was met by a stone-faced Principal Morrison and a hastily issued no-comment statement. But the real earthquake was just beginning to build momentum. Superintendent William Brennan received the phone call about his son's arrest while he was in a budget meeting with the school board. The color drained from his face as Officer Martinez explained the charges Kyle was facing, conspiracy to commit assault, attempted assault with a weapon, and unlawful imprisonment. The recording evidence was damning, and the fact that Kyle had explicitly referenced using his father's position to avoid consequences made the situation exponentially worse. "I need to see that recording," Brennan demanded. "You'll have the opportunity to review the evidence during your son's arraignment." Officer Martinez replied, "But Mr. Brennan, I should warn you that this case involves potential civil rights violations as well. The FBI's Civil Rights Division has been notified, and they'll be conducting their own investigation into whether this incident was part of a pattern of discrimination at Riverside High." The phone went silent for a long moment. Then Brennan said, "I'll be right there," and hung up. Back at the school, Scarlett sat in Principal Morrison's office, fielding phone calls from her mother, her father's commanding officer, and a lawyer from the Iowa Civil Liberties Union who'd somehow heard about the case and offered to represent her pro bono. Through the office window, she could see news vans beginning to arrive in the parking lot. "This is going to be a media circus," Principal Morrison said, his face grim as he watched the reporters setting up their equipment. "The district is going to want to handle this quietly, keep it from becoming a bigger story." Scarlett looked at him with the same steady gaze that had unnerved Kyle Brennan just hours earlier. "Mr. Morrison, with all due respect, this story is already bigger than Riverside High. 3 students conspired to assault me because they felt threatened by my academic performance and my military family background. The superintendent's son led this conspiracy and explicitly stated that he could use his father's influence to avoid consequences. This isn't going away quietly." Her phone buzzed with a text message from her father. "Saw the news online. Proud of you for standing your ground. Coming home early. Stay strong." As if on cue, Principal Morrison's secretary knocked on the door and entered with a worried expression. "Sir, there's a woman here from the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. She says she needs to speak with Miss Thompson and review all disciplinary records for the past 3 years." Scarlett stood up, shouldering her backpack with the same calm precision she displayed throughout this entire ordeal. "Mr. Morrison, I think it's time for me to go home. I have some homework to catch up on, and I suspect tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day." As she walked out of the office and through the hallway toward the main entrance, students stepped aside to let her pass. Some stared with open curiosity, others with something that looked like awe. A few even nodded respectfully, recognizing that something fundamental had changed at Riverside High. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as Scarlett emerged from the building, casting long shadows across the parking lot where news crews were still setting up for the evening broadcasts. She paused on the front steps, looking back at the red brick facade that had seemed so intimidating just 3 weeks earlier. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring more challenges, legal proceedings, media attention, and probably retaliation attempts from the families involved. But tonight, she was simply Scarlett Thompson, daughter of Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson, scholarship student at Riverside High School, and a young woman who'd proven that sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths. Her phone rang as she reached the sidewalk. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. "Miss Thompson, this is Rebecca Martinez from Channel 7 News. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share your side of what happened today. The public deserves to know the truth about what's really going on at Riverside High." Scarlett smiled, thinking about her father's words about truth being the best weapon when you could prove it. "Miss Martinez, I'd be happy to tell my story, but I think you should know that what happened today is just the beginning. There's a lot more truth that needs to come to light at this school." As she continued walking toward her apartment above Murphy's hardware store, Scarlett could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching. By tomorrow morning, Cedar Falls would be the center of a national conversation about privilege, power, and the courage it takes to stand up for what's right. The first death threat arrived at 6:37 a.m. the next morning, slipped under the door of Scarlett's apartment above Murphy's hardware store while she was getting ready for what would become the most surreal day of her 17-year-old life. The note, printed on expensive letterhead from Webb & Associates law firm, was brief and direct. "Withdraw your accusations or face consequences beyond your imagination. Some fights can't be won by trailer trash." Scarlett photographed the note, forwarded it to Officer Martinez, and calmly finished her breakfast of instant oatmeal and black coffee. By 7 a.m., 3 more news vans had joined the growing media encampment in the Murphy's Hardware parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray October sky like metallic flowers blooming in anticipation of the storm about to break. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since 5:30 a.m. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times. Every major news outlet in America wanted to interview the scholarship student who'd single-handedly exposed the rot at the heart of Iowa's most prestigious private school. Scarlett had declined them all, waiting for one specific phone call that finally came at 7:15 a.m. Scarlett Elizabeth Thompson. Came the familiar gravelly voice that had been her anchor through 17 years of military moves and deployments. "I saw the news. Are you hurt?" "No." "Daddy," she said, feeling tears threaten for the first time since the whole ordeal began. "I'm okay. I did what you taught me." Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson was calling from Ramstein Air Base in Germany, where his transport to Iowa would depart in 4 hours. "I know you did. Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. But this is about to get much bigger than one school or one incident. Are you ready for that?" Through her window, Scarlett could see reporters interviewing anyone willing to talk, store owners, students walking to school, even Mrs. Murphy from downstairs, who'd never spoken more than 10 words to her in 3 weeks. "I think so. But Daddy, they're not going to let this go quietly. I got a death threat this morning." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Scarlett wondered if the connection had dropped when her father spoke again. His voice carried the cold precision she'd heard him use when discussing combat operations. "Forward that threat to the FBI field office in Des Moines immediately. Agent Sarah Coleman is expecting your call. I contacted her commanding officer last night. This isn't just about bullying anymore. Scarlett, this is about civil rights violations, conspiracy, and federal crimes. You're not fighting this alone." By 8 a.m., as Scarlett walked the 6 blocks to Riverside High through a gauntlet of reporters shouting questions, the story had gone national. Number, Justice for Scarlett, was trending on Twitter. The video someone had secretly recorded of Kyle, Marcus, and Tyler being loaded into ambulances was playing on every major news network. Cable news hosts were debating privilege, accountability, and the military family experience with the kind of intensity usually reserved for presidential elections. The scene at Riverside High resembled a disaster area. Police barriers kept reporters and protesters at least 50 yards from the building, but their voices carried across the morning air like a persistent hum of righteous anger. Students arriving for classes moved through the chaos with shell-shocked expressions, many stopping to take selfies with the news crews in the background. Principal Morrison met Scarlett at a side entrance, flanked by 2 Cedar Falls police officers and a woman in a severe black suit who introduced herself as Federal Agent Sarah Coleman. "Miss Thompson," Agent Coleman said, her handshake firm and her eyes sharp with intelligence. "Your father speaks very highly of your character and judgment. I've reviewed the evidence you collected yesterday, and I need you to know that this investigation now extends far beyond the bathroom incident." As they walked through hallways that felt dramatically different from just 24 hours earlier, Agent Coleman explained what the FBI had discovered in less than 18 hours of investigation. The group chat between Kyle, Marcus, and Tyler contained not just plans for yesterday's assault, but detailed discussions of previous incidents targeting scholarship students, minority students, and anyone who didn't fit Riverside High's unofficial social hierarchy. "We've identified at least 12 other victims over the past 3 years," Agent Coleman said as they entered Principal Morrison's office. "Students who were systematically harassed, had their academic work sabotaged, or were driven to transfer schools. The pattern is clear and documented." Principal Morrison looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His usually pressed suit was wrinkled, his tie askew, and his hands shook slightly as he poured coffee from the machine in the corner of his office. "Agent Coleman, I want to assure you that the administration had no knowledge of any systematic harassment." "Mr. Morrison," Agent Coleman interrupted, pulling out a thick folder. "We executed search warrants on the school's email servers at 6 a.m. this morning. We have communications between you, Superintendent Brennan, and several board members discussing ways to handle problem students and maintain institutional harmony. Would you like to revise your statement? The color drained from Morrison's face as he realized the full scope of what was unfolding. This wasn't just about 3 students and a bathroom incident anymore. This was about institutional conspiracy to violate the civil rights of students based on socioeconomic status, race, and military family background. Scarlett sat quietly in a chair by the window, watching news helicopters circle overhead, while Agent Coleman methodically dismantled everything the Riverside High administration thought they could hide. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Took emergency leave. Flying to Iowa this afternoon. Love you. At 9:30 a.m., as first period was beginning across the school, Superintendent William Brennan arrived with 3 lawyers and a public relations consultant who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Brennan's usual confidence had been replaced by the desperate energy of a man watching his career implode in real time. "This is a witch hunt," he declared as he stormed into Morrison's office, apparently forgetting that federal agents don't generally appreciate being accused of conducting witch hunts. "My son is the victim here. He's lying in a hospital bed with a concussion, while this girl is being treated like some kind of hero for committing assault." Agent Coleman stood slowly, her 5'8" frame somehow seeming to fill the entire office. "Mr. Brennan, your son is facing federal civil rights charges, in addition to the state assault charges. The evidence we've collected suggests this was part of a systematic campaign to intimidate and silence students who don't conform to your school's preferred demographics. I'd strongly suggest you reconsider your approach to this situation. What happened next would be replayed on cable news for weeks to come." Brennan, apparently deciding that his best defense was an aggressive offense, pointed directly at Scarlett and said, "This is all about money. Her family is looking for a payday, and they're using my son to get it. Military families always think they're entitled to special treatment." The silence that followed was so complete that everyone in the room could hear the distant chanting of protesters outside. "Justice for Scarlett! Justice for Scarlett!" Scarlett stood up slowly, her green eyes fixed on Brennan with the kind of steady gaze that had unnerved Kyle and his friends just 24 hours earlier. When she spoke, her voice carried across the room with crystalline clarity. "Mr. Brennan, my father is currently flying home from his 3rd combat deployment in Afghanistan to make sure I'm safe from the threats your family's friends are making against me. He's missed 3 Christmases, 4 birthdays, and my high school graduation ceremony to serve this country. The only thing my family has ever asked for is the opportunity to earn our place through merit and hard work. Your son and his friends decided that wasn't enough. They decided to use violence and intimidation to put me in what they considered my proper place. And now you're trying to use your position and influence to avoid the consequences of their choices." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the final blow. "You're right about one thing, though. This is about money. It's about how you've used your wealth and position to protect students who commit crimes, while punishing those who dare to excel despite their circumstances. It's about how you've perverted the educational system to serve your own interests, rather than all students equally. And yes, my family will probably receive financial compensation for the civil rights violations your administration has committed, but that money won't erase the trauma your son and his friends inflicted on me and countless other students. It will, however, help ensure that other military families don't have to choose between accepting abuse and fighting for justice." Agent Coleman cleared her throat. "Mr. Brennan, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy to violate civil rights, obstruction of justice, and mail fraud related to federal education funding. You have the right to remain silent." By noon, the story had exploded beyond anyone's expectations. The image of Superintendent Brennan being led away in handcuffs while news cameras rolled had been viewed more than 50 million times across various social media platforms. Number Riverside scandal joined number Justice for Scarlett as trending topics. Military families across the country began sharing their own stories of discrimination and harassment their children had faced in schools, where wealth and status mattered more than service and sacrifice. Scarlett spent her lunch period in Agent Coleman's makeshift command center in the school library, reviewing evidence and providing additional context for the investigation. The scope of the corruption was staggering: falsified disciplinary records, manipulated test scores, federal education funds diverted to benefit wealthy donors, and a systematic campaign to drive out students who didn't fit the school's desired image. "How long has this been going on?" Scarlett asked, as she reviewed email chains between administrators discussing how to handle problem students. "Based on what we've found so far, at least 15 years. Agent Coleman replied, "Possibly longer. Your incident was just the catalyst that brought everything to light. Sometimes it takes one person with the courage to stand up for the truth to expose decades of institutional corruption." At 1:45 p.m., as Scarlett was preparing to return to class for the first time since the incident, a commotion outside the library windows caught her attention. A black SUV with military plates was pulling into the parking lot, followed by 3 more vehicles carrying what appeared to be a full military escort. Her father had arrived. Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson stepped out of the lead vehicle, wearing his dress uniform, his ribbons and decorations, telling the story of 15 years of distinguished service. He was followed by Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base commander who'd personally arranged his emergency leave, and Captain David Rodriguez, the military attorney who specialized in civil rights cases involving military families. The crowd of reporters surged toward the military convoy, but the escort detail formed a protective perimeter that allowed the 3 officers to enter the school through the main entrance. Scarlett watched through the library windows as her father's presence seemed to change the entire energy of the scene outside. Protesters stood straighter. Reporters spoke more respectfully into their cameras, and even the police officers adjusted their posture in recognition of the gravity that military bearing brought to any situation. When her father entered the library 10 minutes later, Scarlett felt the last of her emotional walls crumble. She ran to him with tears streaming down her face, not caring that federal agents, school administrators, and lawyers were watching. For the first time in 24 hours, she felt completely safe. "I'm sorry I wasn't here when you needed me," he whispered as he held her tight. "You were here?" "Daddy," she whispered back. "Everything you taught me, everything you prepared me for, you were here." Colonel Hayes approached Agent Coleman and introduced herself. "Agent Coleman, I understand you're investigating civil rights violations against military family members. The Department of Defense takes these matters very seriously. We're prepared to provide whatever support you need for this investigation." What followed was a 3-hour meeting that would fundamentally change how civil rights violations against military families were investigated and prosecuted. The Pentagon had been quietly tracking incidents where military children faced discrimination in schools, and Scarlett's case provided the perfect opportunity to address the problem systematically. By 5 p.m., the legal and political implications of the Riverside scandal were becoming clear. The Iowa Department of Education announced a comprehensive investigation of all private schools receiving state funding. The Department of Justice announced that Riverside High would serve as a test case for new federal guidelines protecting military families from educational discrimination. The FBI revealed that similar investigations were being opened at elite private schools in 12 other states where military families had reported discrimination. Kyle Brennan, Marcus Webb, and Tyler Mitchell were formally charged that afternoon with conspiracy to commit assault, civil rights violations, and hate crimes. Their families' attempts to hire expensive legal representation were complicated by the fact that several prominent law firms refused to take cases that had attracted negative national attention to their clients. The 3 families' next move was as predictable as it was desperate. At 6 p.m., as the evening news was beginning its coverage of the day's developments, representatives from the Brennan, Webb, and Mitchell families approached Scarlett's father with a settlement offer. The proposal was staggering: $5 million in exchange for Scarlett's agreement to accept private tutoring for the remainder of high school, a full scholarship to any college of her choice, and a signed statement that the bathroom incident had been a misunderstanding between teenagers that escalated beyond anyone's intentions. Staff Sergeant Thompson listened to the offer with the patience of someone who'd negotiated with hostile forces in active combat zones. When the lawyers finished their presentation, he was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Gentlemen, my daughter was physically assaulted by 3 students who planned their attack in advance and explicitly stated their intention to humiliate her because of her family's military service and economic circumstances. They brought a weapon to school with the specific intent of using it to harm her. Your clients then attempted to use their family influence to avoid consequences for these actions. He paused, looking at each lawyer in turn. You're offering $5 million to make this go away quietly. But here's what you don't understand. This isn't about money for my family. This is about ensuring that no other military child has to face what my daughter faced. This is about holding people accountable for their choices, regardless of their family, wealth, or social status. This is about the principle that in America, merit matters more than money. The lead attorney, a man named Harrison Webb who happened to be Marcus's uncle, leaned forward. Sergeant Thompson, with all due respect, principals don't pay for college tuition or provide financial security for your family's future. Scarlett's father smiled then, the same cold smile she'd inherited and used to such devastating effect in the bathroom 24 hours earlier. Mr. Webb, I've spent 15 years defending the principles this country was founded on. I've served 3 combat deployments, protecting the idea that all Americans deserve equal treatment under the law. My daughter has proven that she embodies those same principles. $5 million, $50 million, $500 million, no amount of money would convince us to abandon those principles now. By 7 p.m., the settlement offer had been formally rejected and leaked to the media, adding another layer to the national conversation about privilege, accountability, and the value of doing what's right versus doing what's profitable. The evening news coverage was unlike anything Scarlett had ever experienced. Her story was the lead segment on every major network, with commentators comparing her actions to Rosa Parks, Ruby Bridges, and other civil rights pioneers who'd stood up to institutional discrimination despite overwhelming pressure to stay quiet. But the moment that would define her forever came during a live interview with CNN's Anderson Cooper, conducted via satellite from the Cedar Falls High School library while her father sat beside her for support. Scarlett, Cooper asked, you've become a symbol for military families and students who face discrimination in schools across America. How does that feel? And what would you say to other young people who might be facing similar situations? Scarlett looked directly into the camera, thinking about all the students who'd contacted her through social media since yesterday, sharing their own stories of harassment and discrimination. Mr. Cooper, I didn't set out to become a symbol for anything. I just wanted to go to school, get an education, and make my father proud while he was serving our country overseas. But when 3 students decided to physically assault me because they felt threatened by my academic performance and my family's military service, I had a choice. I could stay silent and hope the problem would go away, or I could stand up for myself and face the consequences. She paused, gathering her thoughts. To other young people facing similar situations, I want you to know that you're not alone. Document everything. Know your rights. Find adults you can trust to help you. And remember that your worth isn't determined by your family's bank account or social status. It's determined by your character, your effort, and your willingness to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. The interview concluded with Cooper asking about her plans for the future. I'm going to finish high school. Scarlett said simply, I'm going to go to college, probably to study law or public policy, and I'm going to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other students. Because in America, everyone deserves the chance to succeed based on their merit, not their family's wealth or influence. 6 months later, Scarlett Thompson graduated as valedictorian of Cedar Falls Consolidated High School, which had absorbed the remaining non-corrupt students and faculty from Riverside High after the private school lost its accreditation and closed permanently. Kyle Brennan was serving an 18-month sentence in juvenile detention. Marcus Webb and Tyler Mitchell were completing court-ordered community service and anger management counseling. The 3 families had ultimately paid a combined settlement of $12 million, which was used to establish the Military Family Educational Justice Fund, providing legal support and scholarships for military children facing discrimination in schools across America. Scarlett's graduation speech, delivered to a crowd that included her father in full dress uniform, her mother who'd taken a permanent position at the local veterans hospital, and Agent Coleman, who'd become something of a family friend, focused on the power of truth, the importance of courage, and the responsibility each person has to stand up for justice. What happened to me that day in a school bathroom was terrible, she said, looking out at a crowd that included dozens of reporters and hundreds of military families who traveled to Cedar Falls for the ceremony. But what happened afterward? The investigation that exposed years of corruption, the changes in federal law that now protect military families, the conversations about privilege and accountability that are happening in schools across America, that was worth fighting for. As she accepted her diploma and the full scholarship to Harvard University that had been offered based on her academic achievement and civil rights advocacy, Scarlett thought about the girl she'd been just 8 months earlier, scared, alone, and uncertain about her place in a world that seemed designed to favor wealth over merit. That girl was gone, replaced by a young woman who understood that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons or violence, but with courage, documentation, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. The scissors that Kyle Brennan had brought to that bathroom with the intention of humiliating her had instead cut away the facade of respectability that had hidden decades of corruption and discrimination. In trying to cut her down to size, he'd inadvertently cut through the lies that had protected his family and friends from accountability for their actions. Justice, Scarlett had learned, sometimes arrives with the sharp edge of unexpected consequences, and sometimes the quietest voices carry the sharpest truths of all.